Believe it or not, there are those among us who wish you to remain slaves. Under this current crazy left-wing progressive tax code, the Tax Foundation says that the top 50% of all taxpayers paid 97.7% of all the federal income taxes, while the bottom 50% paid the remaining 2.3%. But the unfairness and corruption is even worse than all of that. Depending on which source you find, folks, Americans are paying way more than their fair share to an oppressive tax system. Americans have been made slaves to government by paying between 50 to 60% of their earnings to government in some form or fashion. This is not American. The America Last crowd lies to keep corruption going. That's my analysis in today's preamble. Contrary to what apparatchiks in both elected and non-elected government believe, Americans were not born to keep them in the lifestyle to which they've grown accustomed. It is not incumbent on the American taxpayer to come up with more of our money because some leftist fool wants to pad his pockets or the pockets of his cronies with another unconstitutional or backward taxpayer-funded scheme. In other words, it's not up to Americans to have less for their family so that some government simpletons don't have to work for a living. Elon Musk put out an X post explaining why government employees shouldn't have to do what every private sector employee does, justify their jobs. Musk writing, quote, "The reason this matters is that a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work that they are not checking their email at all. In some cases, we believe non-existent people or the identities of dead people are being used to collect paychecks. In other words, there is outright fraud," end quote. Undercover video does expose left-wing groups and shadow accounts having money sent to them by the government via taxpayers, even though those groups do not work for the government. This is a sickness of left-wing thought, folks. They love irony and they revel in forcing you to pay for their sick and twisted efforts to bring about the collapse of the Constitution and, of course, your continued enslavement. Which is why it's so perplexing that Senate Republicans not only wanted to keep the unsustainable China virus overspending levels in their proposed reconciliation package, they actually wanted to overspend more, allegedly to fund President Trump's priorities. To add insult to injury, the Senate did not include making the Trump tax cuts of 2017 permanent. That means the United States Senate under Republican control has teed up a $4.5 trillion tax increase on us. Remember, it's not our job to fund every stupid and selfish idea that comes out of Washington, D.C. The last fiscal year, the America Last Republicans and Democrats teamed up to overspend $7.5 trillion using the China virus as an excuse, even though the pandemic is long past. In 2019, the fake budget was an unacceptably high $4.4 trillion. That's how badly the America Last crowd is screwing us over. Americans are outraged and are excited that the Department of Government Efficiency, the only federal agency designed to stop the federal government's exploitation of our people, is getting to the bottom of this massive government overspending. DOGE is getting accolades from those of us who no longer wish to be slaves to this government. So now the propaganda war is on. Go with me on this. On October 22nd, 2024, Reuters Ipsos poll claimed that Kamala Harris was winning the presidential race by 48% to 45%. On September 18th, Quinnipiac posted a poll showing Trump was losing in key battleground states. Quinnipiac said in Pennsylvania, Harris would get 51% to Trump's 45%. In Michigan, Harris would win with 50% to Trump's 45%. And in Wisconsin, Harris would edge out Trump 48 to 47%. And finally, Gallup. On November 3rd, Gallup claimed Harris was viewed more favorably than President Trump, saying 49% of Americans have a favorable view of Harris compared to 44% viewing Trump favorably. As you all know, those polls were wrong. Not only did Trump win all the battleground states, as we now know, internal Democrat polling showed that Kamala Harris never held a lead over President Trump in their head-to-head matchup in the 2024 race. But these polls were not out there to reflect public opinion, but rather shape it. And they were wrong. So, isn't it curious that the Karl Rove Never Trump Network comes out with a recent headline, quote, "Surprising new poll numbers released on Trump's performance so far in the White House," end quote. Now, when you click on the story, you're going to read that Americans supposedly are not supportive of President Trump and Elon Musk's efforts to bring accountability to the bloated, unaccountable, and corrupt federal government. And you'll never guess which polls the Karl Rove Never Trump Network cited to make their case. That's right. Quinnipiac, Reuters, and Gallup. The same polls that got the 2024 race so wrong. Now, why would the Karl Rove Never Trump Network try to establish a narrative that Americans don't support Trump's efforts to rein in the rogue federal government? Perhaps they're trying to form public opinion, citing suspect polls, rather than reflect public opinion? Maybe the Karl Rove Never Trump Network is laying a foundation to try to flip control of Congress back to our oppressors, the Democrats, even after all that those Democrats had done to curtail human freedom, the rule of law, and of course their war on women. This government is too big and spends too much of our great-grandkids' money. Once Musk and Trump get done with discretionary spending, they should move on to this stupidly named mandatory spending. It is my sincere belief they will find grotesque levels of fraud and abuse against we the people there. And don't buy that line that it's mandatory overspending. If Congress created the spending, they can stop it. There's no such thing as mandatory overspending. And don't buy the propaganda being pushed by some. You know, folks, I thank God for my wonderful wife, my kids, my country, the greatest nation ever. And Americans like you who believe in the truth, the Chris Salcedo Show will never stop fighting for you.
The Chris Salcedo Show, for the news you need to know.